Okay, so I've had a break. I didn't have a Kit Kat. Wait, I do have a Kit Kat. Huh. I've heard and made that joke so many times it shouldn't still be surprising. Right, and the next stage, when I get my head straight, is to insert the foam stabilizer inside the 2 layers. Might be a bit overkill, but I do like how sturdy it is, and it should stand up by itself. So overkill, maybe. I'd rather overkill than leave it alive. Right, foam stabilizer in here. I still have to cut that because all of my project bags are full, and until I finish this I don't have time or energy to make another. So rather than cut everything, put it in a project bag, well, it doesn't help that I'm making this up as I go, so I'm not always entirely sure how big to cut things, so I decided to cut as I go as well. Anyway, yeah, so I've got the foam stabilizer to cut, and then top stitch along here, fold that in, top stitch along there, and I've got to measure. Right, we need to cut 7.5. This is why I'm using inches, is because my mat is in inches. I do also think in inches better, to be honest. 7.5. Actually, I think we'll get away with 7.25 to save trimming. So when I did this side, I cut and I had to trim, put it in, work out that it doesn't fit, take it out, trim it, and then repeat. 7.5, and that's 6.5, so we'll do 7.25 by 6.25. This is the foam stabilizer. It is Mohusu and already covered in cap. That's where I cut the heart out because I wanted the cover applique to stand out a little bit. Get my quilting, and last time I used my rotary cutter, but I made a right mess, so we're going to do, I know I said 7.25, but I'm going to mark at 7.5 because this edge is really bad. I did a terrible job. I'll put my chalk pens away. Okay, so I'll use yellow. 7. Wait, I keep doing this. I'm marking the wrong edge. As it happens, I do need 6.5. Well, 6.25, but the number of times I have cut the fabric too small because I've marked the wrong edge. Ugh. And I'm going to use my big scissors to cut this because my regular fabric scissors are going to struggle, I think. My big scissors. I bought a scissor sharpener from Fiskars and tried it, and if anything it's actually blunted the edges of my scissors even more. So the scissors that I would normally use for cutting fabric are now my backup scissors because there's only a small section of the blade that actually works. And I don't know if I didn't use the sharpener correctly, or I mean that's the likeliest answer. out of the way. And somehow it's stained because it's been on the shelf, the middle shelf of my cart, which is under where my drinks go, and I guess spill. Whoops. Chop this head off. So I did say that, yeah, it was wrong scissors. These are my middle scissors, which I use for, in this case, trimming, but usually fabric cutting because they are better. And chopping off about, I think it's probably an eighth or so of an inch, which means it's still an eighth wider than it probably needs to be, but we'll see. This is where I say this is the fun part, but it's really not. It does not want to go in. I'm going to chop another bit off. If you start small, I learnt this on one of my first projects. You trim off the tiniest amounts possible, and then you can always take off more. Whereas if you take off too much in the start, you can't add it back, unlike the digital world. I think it's more or less the right width. Actually, might have chopped off too much. What was I saying? Yes. The irony. Yeah. Take off another bit on the long edge, and that should do it. No more on the short edge. Hi, Kit Kat. Hi, baby. You wonder who I'm talking to? No, he used to be talking to myself. I don't actually talk to myself much. Pardon me. Okay, that corner is annoying. That corner off. Right. And now, I'm using my wonderful fabric clips that's not in the edge properly. To make sure it stays where it's put. While I sew the bottom edge. I actually found it was easier to fold one side over the foam and then meet them like that, rather than trying to whatever the heck I was trying to do the first time. Let's pin this while I get my needle. Now you could, if you had done this properly, like I haven't, I trimmed it far too much. what was I saying? Yes, I trimmed it too much. But if you have plenty of fabric, you can pin all the way across before you start sewing. Actually, I might try that now. I mostly just held it together with clips on the other side. I do try to avoid pins if I can, because they are quite jabby. Yes, they don't like me. Actually, I think it might be easier to fold the other side over. Yes, that will work better. Just don't have the enough fabric on the other side to fold it over properly, and it's already fraying quite badly, so sewing this together not a moment too soon. Yes, what did I say about stabbing myself? Now, I may have to do some adjusting as I sew. Ow. This is especially true because this fabric doesn't seem to be, the honeycomb doesn't seem to be lining up with the inside, so I'm going to have to start from this end and work my way back with the pins. Try and stretch it out a little bit more. The weird thing is that it should fit. I'm not sure why it doesn't. It's possibly this part here that's throwing it off. In a previous video I said this wasn't quite lined up. I think I'm going to have to start at this end, which works out better actually because I will be sewing the outside then. Yes. This way. Less likely to stab myself if the pins are in the right side. Do apologise if this video is boring you. I thought it would benefit whoever decides to make this hook book from the pattern. It's not really a pattern, tutorial that I'm releasing on my blog at some point. I thought it would benefit you guys to see me working on it, but it didn't occur to me to do so until I was already pretty much finished. So you just get to see me fighting with pins. Maybe that, will give you a kick, hearing me a lot. Or maybe you just like to know that you're not the only one who fights with pins. This is not working. I'm not sure what's going on. Let's take this pin and try and straighten it out. Cut it really close there. On both sides of that word. Oh, this is frustrating. I had a near perfect hookbook, and now it looks like I'm going to have to do some fancy work to get this to line up properly. And by fancy work, I mean I have no idea what I'm doing. Might be able to. It shouldn't be too obvious. We shall see. Right. I'm going to put those away before I lose them. The licking stick trick. It works better with embroidery thread than with normal quilting cotton. I just came up with that name for it, by the way. Let's see if I can stab myself, yes. One of the things you can do if your fabric isn't quite lining up properly is to sort of tease them into more of the position that you want. Which is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to tease the inside that way a little bit and the outside that way a little bit, so hopefully when I get to this end there'll be much less of the excess to worry about. I was hoping the chalk lines would have disappeared by now, but I'm not sure how to, I think I'm going to have to wet wipe them, try and wet wipe them, use a baby wipe. You know, I spend far too much time in the American internet when I start calling things by American names instead of what we Brits call them. To be fair, baby wipes have much more use than just for babies, so calling them wet wipes makes more sense, really. I use them quite a lot, and I'm not baby, last time I checked. I can act like a child, but I'm not actually a baby. I also use an old Kit Kat, which she really does not like. She doesn't like the smell of them, but, you know, if you own a pet, probably of any sort really, there are things that they don't tell you about, like having to wipe bogies out of their nose. Or clean dirt out of their ears. That's the one that I use the wipes most for. But she does have fluffy pantaloons, so she often needs a butt trim. You know, a trim around her butt fluff. She gets Klingons on occasion if I don't trim her. Ow. If I don't trim her butt fluff. And that's the sort of conversation that you don't expect in a sewing video. And I wish the weather would make its mind up today. It's really dull outside, quite blowy, and it's very hot. Not, you know, heatwave hot, thank God, but hot enough that I feel like I'm going to melt if I don't turn the fan up. But if I turn the fan up, you guys won't be able to hear me, which, you know, might be a godsend, really. Right, I'm going to try and get to this end before I take another break. Don't know how well I'm doing at teasing the fabric to stretch. No, we've got a knot. Oh no. Weird. Yes, occasionally I get knots, and it's because one strand has somehow shortened next to the other strand, and they get wrapped around each other. And I get that knots happen. It's probably quite a popular sewing pun. Nuts happen, you know, like the it happens one, only with swearing. Nuts happen. But yeah, it's the way that one strand gets longer and the other gets shorter, and I don't know how that happens. Let's get caught on the fabric or something. Oh, running stitch takes so long. I mean, when you're backstitching, it doesn't matter what it looks like, so you can just speed along. But running stitch as top stitch, you have to be you have to try and keep your stitches more or less the same length. I say more or less because it's next to impossible to actually. I used to try measuring them out. But my pen always made the stitches longer than I could. To get a 2mm stitch with a pen, you basically just need a dot. I feel like I've had enough practice now that I can actually keep to a straight line at least. I used to have to measure every sewing line that I was working on, because otherwise it would be, yeah, I still do, to be fair, when I'm doing the seams, but running a running stitch, because it's so close to the edge, it's a lot easier to keep straight. But yes, I measure my seams still, because otherwise I start out with 1/2 inch and wind up with 1/4 inch, or vice versa. And I already have enough problems making sure that I've measured everything properly without having to compensate for poor sewing. So yes, measure your seams, ladies and gents, and non-binaries. Right, I've reached the end, but don't forget, Emma, you still need to, yes, you need to fix this bit. Right, so just snuck in through there, through the layers, to add some stitches, and I've got to try and get these in the same place so they're not as obvious. So, because somehow when I top stitched it before, I missed one side. No idea how. But that probably means that it's not actually sewn together. So we will do it again and make sure it's secure this time. And there is a stitch there, so that's it. And I'm going to fasten off. Actually, I'm going to go in here and sneak through the layers again, and come out here where I fastened off before, and then that is already obvious, so crap, my layers aren't. Now what I'm going to do is fast enough through both sides because that's letting the inside layer peek out. Damn it. Yes, I'm going to try and fix that. I didn't want to have to have it fastened off in an obvious place, but better that than having the thing fall apart, which I don't think it will because it is actually sewn in. It's just showing a frayed edge, which I don't want. So I'll shove that in a bit further, and we will cut this off, and I will take a break, and then next time we'll be top stitching the flap down.